You can't go into a temple in the rational mind with something that transcends the mind and get away with it. I mean, it's heresy. I didn't like Hinduism at all at that point. And he wanted to borrow a Land Rover that I had been left entrusted with in India by another friend. So I got the Land Rover and we went up to the mountains, and I was really burned out and very discouraged about my whole Eastern sojourn. And we got to a place in Lucknow where we stayed overnight, and during the night I had to go out and go to the bathroom. I peed, and while I was peeing I thought of my mother, who had died 6 months before. And I just thought of her and went back to sleep. And the next day we drove 100 miles up to this little temple and met this guru who put me on terribly. I mean, he said, "You came in a big car, you'll give it to me." I mean, it was like, he knew everywhere I was irritated, and they were all laughing at me, and I was wildly paranoid. And then he sent us for lunch, and then he brought me back, and he sat me down. He said, "You were sitting under the stars last night." I said, "Yeah." Closed his eyes. He said, "You were thinking about your mother." Now that's pretty good. I mean, that's 100 miles away, and nobody knew that but me. So what's the probability of me being out of the stars thinking about my mother last night? Well, okay, maybe. That's pretty good, but I'm getting edgy. Then he closed his eyes and said, "She died last year," which is just right. And I started to get absolutely wild paranoia. I mean, being a Harvard professor, faced with this thing happening to me, my first impression was that he was a CIA type person. He'd push a button and the earth would open and a file would come out. You know, I mean, I had to understand how, because I was just a passenger in a car in a place that had no telephones, you know. So then he said, "She got very big in the belly before she died." Yeah. He closed his eyes and then he leaned forward and he said, "Spleen," which was just the organ my mother died of. But he said it in English. The rest was in Hindi. And when he said that, my mind, you know, it's like losing purchase on something. You're sliding down with your hands sliding down, or I just couldn't. I gave up. Something gave up. And at that moment, he was about this far from my face. And I started to feel this excruciating pain in my chest, as if a door that had been shut for a long time was being ripped open, like Inner Sanctum or something, a screeching thing. Incredibly painful. And he was just sitting looking at me. And I started to sob and cry. And I didn't know why I was crying. And I basically cried for 2 days. I couldn't stop crying. And the closest I could get was I'm home or what. But whatever that was, that's what happened at that moment. And I never left that temple. I mean, I left, but I stayed 6 months. 2 years earlier, Tim and Nena were on their honeymoon in Almora, which is about 30, 40 miles from that temple. And Timothy took a bus from Almora to Delhi, and on the bus it stopped at the temple that I ended up living at. And my teacher, not my guru, but my teacher, a yogi, got on the bus and sat next to Timothy. And the yogi had he was silent. He'd been silent for years, and he had a chalkboard. And he wrote beautiful English, and Timothy was very impressed with who this guy was. And the bus got to Nainital before it went down the plains to Delhi. And the yogi got off and started walking to the temple. And Timothy was so attracted to him, he got off and started to follow him. And the bus driver then blew the horn, and Timothy had the moment of choice, and he turned and he went back and got on the bus and went to Delhi. And isn't that interesting? 2 years later, I come through a completely different route to the opposite side of the earth, within 1 mile, and come and meet the guy, and it changes my whole life. Right after I met him, he said to me, "You got any of that yogi medicine?" I said, "What yogi medicine?" I thought he meant vitamins. I said, "I've got some, but they won't help a man like you, you know." He said, "Yogi medicine, yogi." And somebody said, "I think he means the acid." I said, "You mean acid?" He said, "Yeah." So I brought acid, and I had pills that were 300 micrograms each. So he held out his hand, so I gave him one, which is a good dose. And he kept, come on, so I gave him a second dose. Come on, he gave him a third. Now, 900 micrograms for a new person, I mean, he was heavyweight, but that's still a good size, and it was really good acid. So he goes like this, see? And he throws it into his mouth, and I think this is going to be pretty interesting, you know, and nothing happens at all, nothing. So I go back to the States, and I tell everybody, this guy took 900 micrograms and nothing happened. Because, I mean, this is our medicine. I'm impressed, you know. But in the back of my mind is the gnawing question, do you suppose he really swallowed it? Maybe he veiled my mind and threw it over his shoulder or something like that, you know. But I don't know. So I come back to India 2 years later, and I find him after about 6 months, and he says to me, first time I come up to him, he says, did you give me some medicine last time you were in India? I said, yeah. He said, did I take it? I said, I think so. He said, what happened? I said, nothing. You got any more of that medicine? So I said, yeah. So I brought out, and I had 5 pills, 300 each. And one of them was broken. He wouldn't take the broken one. He took the 4 others. And he took each one, and he stuck it on his tongue. And he made absolutely sure that I saw that he took it all in. Then he said, can I have water? And I said, yeah, pani. Garam to hot or cold? I said, doesn't matter. So he called for water, and he drank some water. He said, will it make me puggle, will it make me crazy? I said, probably. And at one point, he went under his blanket, and then he came back down looking absolutely mad, and I thought, what have I done to this poor old man? He doesn't understand the power of our medicine, and he probably did throw it over his shoulder last time, and I've trapped him into taking it. Oh my God, how can I live with this? And all this. And then when he had me totally paranoid, he laughed in glee. And nothing happened. And then he said, these were known about thousands of years ago. He said in the Indus Valley, in the Kula Valley, he said. But he said most of that's been forgotten. Now, yogis don't do the preparations for this kind of experience anymore. They did fasting and they did things before this. And so later I said, should I ever take acid again? He said, if you're in a cool place and you're alone, which is interesting, and your mind is turned towards God, you're feeling much peace, it could be useful. Okay. Then other people said, got him to talk about it, and he said to them, using Christ as the image, he said, it would allow you to come in and have the darshan of Christ, your medicine. But you can only stay 2 hours, and then you have to leave. He said, it would be better to become Christ than to visit him. But your medicine won't do that.